Welcome to the Be the Light Crown Edition podcast. I'm Hanna Fray, your host and pageant queen extraordinaire. Fun fact, while most people are resistant to change, I'm excited by it. So this podcast is designed to allow me to be the light for others. By sharing my experiences across countless topics where I demolished my fears, prejudice, expectations, and rebuilt brick by brick. My hope is I can encourage you to seek knowledge, implement change, and above all, trust in God. So let's get to it. It's time for some you time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Be the Light Crown Edition podcast. This is episode 1 of season 2. I am so excited to be back after it feels like a short, but definitely a few month long break from the last season. And if you're tuning back in, welcome. We're so excited to have you. This season is going to be structured a little bit differently. So we are going to do more of like mini series where I'm dropping sometimes one, sometimes a few episodes on the same day, but it'll be a cumulative like 4 to 6 episodes under like a unified topic. And the first topic that we're going to be doing recording for is travel. This was the most requested topic, and so I'm happy to bring this to the table. And the very first mini topic within travel that we're going to discuss today is traveling internationally. And so we're going to try to keep the structure very similar, where I'll kind of share a little bit about my experiences, and then I'm going to try to keep it a little bit shorter in terms of like 3 to 5 tips or tricks or whatever is applicable to that topic, that mini topic we're doing. And then I'll always, of course, kind of mention the resource I've created for y'all, which is always free, always available on my website. And then, as always, we will end in prayer. So we'll go ahead and dive in. And I want to, again, just talk about kind of broadly traveling internationally. And we always start with like my experiences, just to give you guys an idea of where I'm coming from. So in terms of the youngest I was when I first started traveling internationally, I was a little older than 5, and I actually lived in Italy from the time I was 5 to 8.5, and that was because my brother's dad was in the Air Force. So we were over there. We lived on the base for a little while, but we also lived off base, and there was also a period of time where I went to an all Italian school, kindergarten, which is really really cool. I hate to say I haven't retained any of that Italian language, which is just too bad. But definitely immersed in a different culture, a different world, like very early on, which was such a blessing that my mom was able to provide. So that was the first time that I lived in another country. Okay, and I've also lived in another country a second time, this time at the age of 22. And that was when I traveled to, if you've listened to this podcast before, you probably know this story, but it's when I traveled to St. Vincent and the Grenadines to attend medical school. And I was there for about 9 months. And if you don't know much about this island, they are independently governed. Therefore, it's a lot that you can't possibly expect to know ahead of time in terms of just the regulations and the laws and the social norms and expectations. There were things such as I'm left-handed, and being left-handed on the island, there's a deep-rooted fear of left-handed people, rooted in witchcraft and evil, which I don't know, felt a little jarring. So I had to be, careful to not display my left-handedness in public. You also weren't allowed to wear camo. It was against the law because it was seen as a sign of resistance against their military regime. So just things that, you might not be aware of or might not be thinking of. So left there after 9 months. Outside of that, I kind of tallied it up not long ago, traveled to over 20 different countries, whether that's spending time or passing through. And I've done that since starting in high school, and I'm 31 now. I just like to say I'm 30, but I guess I'm technically 31, and I am nowhere near done. So definitely a lot more on the bucket list. So I feel like I have a pretty good breadth of understanding and experience with traveling internationally. So I want to give you 3 of my top things to expect when it comes to traveling, okay? So the first, which might feel like kind of a duh, but we got to talk about it, is other languages. I know what it's like as Americans, and we're so proud of, being able to speak English, and it feels so common because we're, of course, surrounded by it. But I hate to tell you that English is not the most common language in the world. It's actually Chinese, okay? So not everyone's going to speak English even remotely, or even sign language or, be able to pick up on a few words everywhere that you go. And so it is not the responsibility of the country that you're going to accommodate your lack of knowledge or forethought for not knowing their language when you go to visit. Yes, I understand that you might be able to get away with that in a few of the like highly touristy areas. Okay, oftentimes they are going to have signage and things in both English and the native language just because they're tired of dealing with us, to be honest. It's just easier on them. But it would certainly be much more respectful, and also I would think less stressful for you as a traveler to do a few things. So I would say like maybe learn some of the language if you can. At minimum, just write down a few like phrases or key things and again, at the very, very minimum, like manners. Yes, no, please, thank you, help me. Okay, that's what I would suggest doing. I wouldn't rely so heavily on your phone because there have certainly been circumstances that I've experienced and that you may as well, where your phone doesn't work as expected, you lose your phone gets stolen. Okay, all things that can happen. So I would try to have that written down somewhere, but you also can certainly rely on today's day and age. Technology is advanced. We love it. We love to see it. There is the option, of course, with like data travel passes and whatnot to rely on Google Translate or other services. It's actually how we got out of Pisa whenever we got lost. I was able to pull up my phone, type in what I was trying to say, and it translated it in Italian. And apparently it was sufficient enough to like get us back, which was really stressful because it was a cruise ship. And if you're late for the boat, they leave you, okay? So just recommend that. Consider language. Understand that they're not in the wrong for not knowing English. It is your responsibility to do some, forethought or some awareness of that and do your best to prepare, okay? So second is being aware of and understanding the different social norms. So I kind of alluded to this already, but I just want to kind of share some examples, right? Tipping behaviors. Sometimes it's rude to tip. I understand like wanting to be thoughtful and think that you're doing a good thing by tipping even though you know it's not normal, but it might be considered rude. So just be aware of tipping norms. Service expectations. Okay, my biggest experience in traveling abroad is that there is no fast. That's not a thing. Eating out and doing these other experiences are, as it states, an experience. It's not meant to be fast in and out. And that's honestly, it's preferred. It's the better way to do it. So just be aware that they're not being slow. They're not, intentionally not providing you a service. It's the expectation. Okay? Open and close hours. So especially in America, we are very used to like an immediate access, immediate gratification. 24-hour, whatever. There's a Walgreens in every corner. Okay. You're not going to find that everywhere you go. And so it is your job to be prepared and understand. Or like, siestas, like in South America, a lot of places close mid-afternoon, like from 2 to 4 or 1 to 4 for hours on end, and you're not going to get anything done. So be aware of that. Try to do your research ahead of time and know that that's how it's going to be. Okay? Of course, laws and regulations. I think one of my favorite ones is, so my pageant director, Christy Wishnak, she said that when she went to Dubai, she learned that chewing bubble gum, is actually illegal. And that's one of the ways that they've kept their city like beautiful. And it's like a very serious offense. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Also, when I went to Sydney, Australia, you don't honk your horn. Vehicles have horns. They are to be used in extreme circumstances only. You do not honk your horn for like saying hello or like a friendly like warning ahead of time. No. Get in trouble for that kind of stuff. So I just thought that was so interesting. Okay, comfort standards, right, is another social norm to be aware of. When I lived on St. Vincent and the Grenadines, that island, air conditioning? Haha. No, ma'am. No, sir. Now, our units did because the landlords were instructed that these Americans are going to expect to have air conditioning, and we were only allowed to run it at night when we slept. Like, we weren't allowed to run it during the day and, like, leave it to, kick on and off to cool the house while we were gone. Absolutely not. So, again, or even, like, food that's available in grocery stores, like Staples or certain name brands, like that might not be something that you have access to either. Same with like using your card or needing to have cash on you. In America, we are very like tap happy, okay? You might have to carry quite a bit more money on you whenever you travel abroad. We talked about, like staple accessibility, like food, water, shelter. Okay, there are a lot of poor areas out there. There are a lot of third world countries. St. Vincent and the Grenadines was a third world country, okay? And so just understanding that your level of expectation of comforts and accessibility will likely be different where you're traveling to. Okay, punctuality, another great one. Either it's going to be rude that you're showing up on time, or it's going to be rude that if you're late, like unforgivable. Okay, it just really depends on the culture and the norms, so just be aware of that. Or understanding even like how long engagements are supposed to last. So if like you're going to a wedding or a house party or to an event, maybe a concert in another country, I mean, I don't know. Knowing that how long those things might last might be different than what you're used to. Okay, hospitality is another great one. Maybe you're invited over to a dinner or you're staying at an Airbnb. Okay, it could be considered rude to not bring a gift. I have a friend who, she came to my home and it's a part of her culture and her norms to always, no matter what, without fail, bring a gift when it's the first time you're visiting someone's house. And initially I was like, it made me a little uncomfortable. I'm like, you don't need to do that. And she was like, no, I want to do this. This makes me happy and I want to serve you in this way. And so just being aware of that, hospitality differences could play a part. And then lastly, transportation. Again, in America, we really very heavily rely on, I'll just get a cab, or I'll just get an Uber or whatever. That might not be a thing. Or the cabs are sketchy and like the local transportation is safer, or vice versa, or the color of the cab is sketchy, okay? So you've got to do your research on transportation. And one funny thing that Skylar and I did whenever we traveled from Paris to Barcelona is we actually took a night train, which in my mind was a brilliant idea, and we did survive it, but it was very hectic because it was one of those situations where I didn't fully understand like the stop-start structure of like all the various stops. I didn't know how to know when it was our turn to get off the train because like I wasn't understanding any of the signs or the announcements over the intercom because they weren't in English. We were in a bunk bed situation with other travelers and none of them spoke English, so it was just like couldn't find a conductor. I didn't sleep at all that night. So yeah, just understanding transportation differences. Okay, so that's kind of all lumped into number 2, which is all of those different social norms. And then lastly, travel regulations. Okay, this is really, really important. For the first time, starting in, I want to say 2024, all European countries are going to require a visa from Americans. That has never been the case before. To date, I've only been aware of needing a visa to travel to Australia and a few other like specific countries. Okay, this is now all encompassing for Europe and maybe even more extending than that. So be aware of those changes. Those things take time. Okay, I'm going to tell you a story. So I knew that I needed a visa to go to Sydney, Australia for my pageant. I was not aware, and it was not clear online, and I'm good at doing my research. Okay, it was not clear that I was going to need a pass-through visa, which is total crap, by the way, to go through the Netherlands. Okay, because there was a stopover in Netherlands, and then it went to Australia. I'm absolutely full-blown panicked, okay, in the airport, thinking they're not going to let me in. I can't get on my flight because I don't have this special, like, attribution saying that I'm allowed to pass through that airport. So once I get off my first leg of my flight, and I'm in California now, and I'm, like, waiting to go on my flight to the Netherlands, I am at the counter, and I've only got, like, an hour to make my connection, and I've got all this luggage. It was just, like, so crazy stressful. Christy, my director, is like on the phone, like trying to get through to someone. They're not answering. Ended up being an international call that cost her like $400 or something absolutely insane. I'm like stressing out. So I apply online and it says 50% of the cases it'll get approved right away. 50% of the time it takes 7 to 10 business days. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? I do not have time for this. And so I get to the counter. I'm like fully ready to like bring out the crown and the tiara and the sash and give my whole sob story. And they're like, oh, no, ma'am. No big deal. We can approve it from here. Beep. Cleared. So that was not clear from Googling or researching online. Don't recommend that, but just know that those are blockers to traveling. And yeah, they most certainly won't let you on your flight. So you do have to be careful. Also, vaccinations that are required for certain countries, be aware of that. Those change often, okay? Background checks may be required. So we had to do a background check because of the length of stay for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Skylar and I both did. So just know that that's a possibility. Obviously, passports. A lot of people don't know that like your passport can't be expiring within a certain time frame of leaving and or returning from your trip. So like don't get stuck in another country, okay? Pack packing restrictions, like things that you can or can't bring into the country. We all have gone through immigrations, or maybe you haven't, but by the way, you go through immigrations anytime you go from one country to another, and you have to like fill out this little form saying, no, I didn't bring seeds and this much money and like livestock and like stuff with me. That kind of stuff is serious though, so you do have to be thoughtful of that, and you can get in a ton of trouble, okay? And then also just being aware of the flights and the different airlines. So one big thing when I lived in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is that my expectation of the level of service that airlines had to provide did not align with what they were up to. So they would straight up never be on time, ever. Their departure times were suggestions. Okay, and I mean that literally. Anyone who was on the island with me can attest to this. I don't remember the name. Was it Liat? Something like, and we had this acronym for it that was like leaves like at any time, or it was like something, I can't remember at this moment. And the other fun fact is I always had a connection, right? It was like 3,000 miles from home. I had to leave from that island and hop to another island and then Miami and then go home. If they cause you to miss your connection, they don't have to rebook you. No. You're responsible for buying your ticket. So I had to spend thousands of dollars several times when I would try to go back home until I learned my lesson, just like travel to, I think we would go to San Juan and we would stay in the airport overnight just to be absolutely sure that we would not miss our flight the next day going back home. And when I say stay overnight in the airport, it's outside, outdoors on a bench, but we would like go as a group to stay safe. That's the kind of wild stuff that I went through when I lived in a third world country. So I digress. Be aware, especially transferring from an international airline to like a American-based airline. There might not be that level of service, compensation, rebooking. Okay, so you just, trip insurance might be a good idea in those situations. Okay, so those are the main 3 things, all right? So other languages, different social norms, travel regulations, okay? Things to be aware of. Don't let it scare you. Traveling internationally is amazing. You will certainly not regret it. I am going to put together a 1-pager, just kind of like summarizing these things so that anytime you are looking to book an international trip, you can download the 1-pager and just make sure that like you've crossed off the big things off of your list. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and close in prayer. Dear God, thank you again, as always, for putting this opportunity to reach others so far at this time. 40 different states, 8 other countries internationally that are hearing this message, and we just so appreciate not only this wonderful world that you created that we can travel and that we can visit and appreciate your design, but also just the opportunity to be thoughtful and intentional and careful when traveling as well with our families and our loved ones. I hope that you continue to watch over each and every one who does choose to travel and explore this wonderful world, and thank you again for the opportunity to share what I've learned in my life when it comes to traveling, and we look forward to honoring you and loving you and serving you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone, and go ahead and tune in to part 2 of the travel series. We'll see you next time.